Hi, this is Peter Eliades. My purpose for this videotape is kind of a primer for those of you that have received our programming software, Eliades price projection software. There's nothing complicated about it at all, but you need to know the basics. So we're going to try and go over the basics with you in this video. Have no idea how long it's going to be, but I'll get done what needs to be done for you to understand what you're doing. We sent you, along with the software, there should be a workspace that comes up. And that workspace will look something like this. I don't remember exactly which one we sent. But here's the important thing. You ask, well, where do I start with this analysis? What do I look at? The software deals with about 6 separate time frames. Most of them are interrelated, but for those of you that want to do longer term work, you would use weekly offsets. Those of you that want to do intraday trading, you would use 27-minute offsets for futures and 30-minute offsets for cash charts. Will there be shorter ones than that? Yes, there probably will be in the future. But right now, the shortest we have is 27 and 30, and the longest we have is the weeklies. Now, we also have, and I'll show you that momentarily, we also have offsets for Globex. Remember, that's the only market that trades basically 24 hours a day. So you can't use the same offsets with Globex as you would use for the markets in terms of their day sessions. For the S&P cash here in California, the market opens at 6:30 in the morning, 9:30 Eastern time, closes at 1 o'clock in the afternoon Pacific time, 4 o'clock California time. The futures daytime session goes another 15 minutes to close at 4:15 p.m. Eastern, 1:15 p.m. Pacific. So that's how we break these charts up with that in mind. We'll show you those in a tiny bit. But first we want to show you the concept of how all of this works. So you're going to have a chart, and how you set up your charts depends on you. One suggestion I would make is that you have one workspace for each time period. In other words, you'd have weekly offsets in one workspace, 65-minute charts in another workspace, and work down that way from weekly, daily, 65-minute, 30-minute, 27-minute, and Globex. So you work your way down that way. Now, within each of those, here's what I want to show you now. We have a weekly chart up here for the S&P. If we want to change the offsets, and this is the very longest one we have. In fact, this is a relatively new offset. I never used it before the last year or so. This is I believe it's 200 to 220 week offset for a nominal 8-year projection. And you will very seldom, at least we recently have very seldom seen that crossed, although there have been some great projections given from that offset in the last 5 or 10 years. Okay, so here's a weekly chart. You want to start with the very shortest offset. You want to click on either the blue median line here or one of the offset lines. When you do that, then you will have your option of what offsets to use. You can select them immediately. Stefan did this, and it was a great little insert he made for the program, because otherwise, let me show you the old way of doing it, and you'll still be doing some of this yourself too. You would go to Studies, Edit Studies, and then this is the Eliades cycle price projections. You would customize that, and these are the parameters. So this signal price would apply basically only to daily charts. If you wanted to do intraday projections, bar chart projections, intraday high and low, you would keep median price here. That's the default setting. But if you want to do closing projections, as I have shown you many, many times on the YouTube videos, you would change this median price to close, C-L-O-S-E, not two O's, C-L-O-S-E. And that would change this to, rather than having the blue signal line, it's called the signal line because that's the one that crosses above and below the offsets. Rather than have that be the midpoint of the high and low bar, it's the actual close for the time period. And as I said a moment ago, I would tend to use that only for closing price charts. For now, though, for the sake of showing you around a little bit, we're going to keep median price here. That's the default one to use, and that will give you bar projections. We don't need both of them in there, do we? That would give you bar projections. In fact, we can cancel that, go back to where we were. Okay, so let's look at the other parameters, though. So you've seen us do offsets, two lines, short and long, 3.5 to 4, 7 to 8. And that's what this means by short offset and long offset. Now, if you want the offsets plotted, those would be the lines here, the offset lines, this would be true. This gives you the colors for the bullish projections, green to the upside, downside projections, kind of an orange-red. And once a projection is given and then invalidated, once it's invalidated, it turns gray. This is simply a transparency of the color projection area. You can make that darker or lighter as you wish. Now, projection margin in percent. We use that only with weekly charts because on the weekly charts, we basically don't do two different offsets until we get up to 39 to 40 weeks, 100 to 110 weeks, and 200 to 220. But for the shorter periods like 5-week, 10-week, 20-week offsets, what we simply do is, let me show you. You know what these inputs are now, at least for the most part. Here's what we do. We click on the blue line or one of the offset lines. This is a right click, and this comes up. So here are your options. Now, the program knows what time span you're on. It knows you're on weekly charts, so it shows you weekly offsets, okay? 2.5, 2.501. Now, the reason we do the 2.5, 2.501 is simply to give two separate offsets to the computer. So that's the way the software was originally set up. But what we want to do when we use basically the same offsets is in that case allow for a margin of error, a 10% margin of error usually. So let's go to, let's say, an offset of 10 to 10.01. Okay, so when these are given, you'll notice they're not rectangular boxes now. They're almost lines going across. And that's because there's no distance between the offsets, 10 and 10.01. But let's do this. Let's go to Studies, Edit Studies, go to our cycle price projections, customize them, and when we're doing weekly charts, projection margin in percent, we want that to be 10% as a general rule, okay? Now watch what happens to the projection boxes, okay? So all this shows you is the projections with a margin of error. And let's look at a bigger box here. If we go to this one here, the line going across here is the actual projection. The above and lower lines of the rectangular box are the plus and minus 10%, okay? So that's what we're looking at here. We're going to use that margin of error usually only with weekly charts. So for the most part, when you go to Studies, Edit Studies, Customize, projection margin in percent, that's usually going to be 0 because we already have our flexible margins by using two different offsets, okay? All right, let's go down one level and make this a daily chart. We can keep that same SPX symbol there, the S&P cash, and simply write DAILY. And we now have a daily chart on the S&P. But watch what happens. The program is intuitive. It knows that you're on a daily chart. And now when you click on one of the offset lines, it gives you the default offsets for daily charts. 175 to 2, 3.5 to 4, 7 to 8, 12, 1, 13, 8. And you should know by watching my videos what these stand for. The 3.5 to 4 is for a nominal 10-day projection. 7 to 8, nominal 20-day. 12, 1, 13, 8, nominal 5-week, 10-week, 20-week, 40-week, 39 to 40-day offsets give you nominal 78 to 80-week projections. And this, again, is the longest one we do on the daily charts. This is the equivalent of a 4-year projection. Let's toss that on here just for fun and take a look. Okay, we need more data here. So we need to go to, this is going to happen to you while you're working with it. You don't want to put 30 years of data because you may end up screwing up some of the parameters of the program. But we can certainly go back and test, and later versions of this program will let you go way back and do all the tests you want to do. But for now, we're going to put time frame, customize, and simply give ourselves, let's call it 4 years back, maybe even 5. We'll go back 5 years, and now you'll notice that we have the offset showing. Now, look what we have. This projection was given in real time, and we showed that to you in real time. I don't know if we showed you this upside projection yet, but remember what our offset lines are now. Our offset lines are currently 482.3 to 530.5. Those are 2-year offsets for nominal 4-year projections, okay? And again, be aware of the fact that they pop up automatically. They're the default offsets that are given to you. You can switch back and forth real quickly from any one of these. Didn't used to be able to do that, but it's set up now so you can do it. And these may end up being 2 important projection levels. I mean, this one was you know why this was such a big box? You might say, well, that's a huge box. That doesn't help me in terms of analysis. The reason it was a huge box, look at the huge difference between the offset lines here. Usually they're pretty close together. So when you cross them, you won't have as large a projection box. But when they're this far apart, then this is the first level you measure from. Here's the high, here's the crossing. That gives you this down projection. Here's the high and here's the lower crossing way down here, and that gives you this lower projection way down here. So you have a big projection box. The further apart the offset lines are, the larger your projection box will be. Okay, I don't want to take too much time with this. I just want to give you a feel for how the software works and what you should be looking at. So we're looking now at the daily charts. These are the default offsets for the daily charts. You want to look at the very shortest term projections. If you do that, then you're going to want to really zoom in and take a closer look at these. So you would do something like this just to see what you're looking at. Those are the very short-term projections. Virtually all of them being met. Now, they're met and exceeded, but remember, once they're met, for example, let's take, this is the date of April 17th. So you have this upside box reached on April 17th. Then what you would do is go to the next longer offset, 3.5 to 4, and you'd look at April 17th. That's right here. And again, you met this projection, but then from April 17th, you got a downside projection, which was perfectly met. Your next upside projection from this low on April 21st gives you here, you got to that projection here. So once you reach this projection, then you want to know at that point, that's the date of April 28th, do we have higher projections? So you'd click on either the signal bar, the median, or one of these offsets and go to the next longer offsets. And that will show you, yes, you have higher ones here, but you've already met those. How about here? Let's click on the signal line again. Go to the next longer offsets, 12.1 to 13.8. These are 2.5 week offsets, phenomenal 5-week projections. They are met back here. Actually, well, we'll talk about that later. And so on and so forth. As you know, we now have significantly higher projections given by the next group of offsets. Now, we're going to have to go out on this because remember, we zoomed in on these prices. But you can see, if we move prices over so you can see the bottom here also. All right, there we go. So this was a big upside projection here. We showed it to you at the time, and there it is. So when you cross here, now you're in a situation where you know you have much higher projections, but that doesn't tell you about if we get there, how we're going to get there. When we got in this area and we had confirmed these upside projections, we theorized that we would get this kind of sideways to down action, and so far we're getting that. But that has nothing to do with the use of the software. The use of the software, you simply follow these projections from one offset to the next longer one. Let's go to the next longer one. This one's 24.2, 27.6. Just very quickly, it's beautiful how it's done. It's an elegant piece of software programming. You go to the next one. And now you're getting really close to getting significantly higher projections. Remember, I theorized that we would come back down around the 2,800 level if we're going to cross up and go higher ultimately. So this projection, if we go across and cross around 2,800, which is down here somewhere, it would give about the same upside projection as the nominal 10-week that we just saw. All right. Basically, we're doing this just to give you a little primer as to how to use the software. I'm not too interested now in terms of interpretations. That will come, and you'll get to see that along with the YouTube videos that I do. Once you start to use this, once this is in your little book of tricks, you're going to start to get a really good feel for it. You may end up teaching me a few things because this is the type of software that if you have a good feel for the market, I believe this can work wonders for your trading acumen because you're going to start to see things as you have never seen them before. Let's do this. Let's go to, we're on a cash chart. Let's go to 65 minutes and watch what happens to the default offsets. 65 space MIN, and now we have 65-minute charts. This is much too short. So again, what you want to do, we may have to change some of these defaults, but you know how to get more data. You go to time frame, go down to customize. This is, of course, system 10. You may be using 9.5. And if you are, you know how to get more data too. So instead of doing 30 days back, let's do 5 months back. So we'll have plenty of data. Okay, so now all this is going to fill in, and there's our 65-minute chart. And most importantly, let's take a look at the offsets. Here are the default offsets for the 65-minute chart, all the way up to the real longer ones. Now, a lot of these correspond with other offsets like weekly offsets or daily market day offsets, and we haven't necessarily mapped that out for you yet, but you're going to get that information. You'll be getting more and more information from us if you become a regular user of the software. This is just kind of a how to use the whole thing, how to set it up, okay? So once you start using this, you go to the very shortest, and you, of course, get these very short-term offsets. It isn't going to do you very good if you see them from that distance. So, of course, you'd want to see them much closer. But here you go. Projection met, projection met, projection met, projection met. Now, again, when you look at these and say, yeah, but it was met and then you went further. Yes, those are longer offsets. Let's start looking at the longer offsets. Once you meet one projection, you go to the next longer offset, 5.25 to 6. Let's look at this May 4th to May 5th period. Here you go. Here's the next higher projection given. Okay, we know that we met that on this gap up. Let's take a look at the next longer offset, 10.5 to 12. Well, look at this. And this one was given up here to 2907. We just got up to 2900 and missed getting up there by about 7 points. Came back down and ultimately gave this projection, which was almost perfect for the highs that we've just seen recently. So let's take a look at the next longer offset here. 21 to 24. There you go. Look at this. This one's virtually perfect. And when you miss, I want you to look at this. Okay, you look at this and you say, well, that one's gray. That means you missed the projection. Okay, yes, you did. Technically, you missed the projection. But look by how much you missed it, okay? This is how much you missed it by right there. There's the projection box. There's the low, okay? So I'm not going to go through all of these for you. We'll go out to one slightly longer one. No, there's not even enough data on there for that. Let's go to the next shorter one. We'll go to the 72.6 to 82.8. These fractional offsets. And again, you see no crossings here. Here's a tentative crossing, but never confirmed to get below both of them. And here we are. We're getting close, actually, on this day when I'm doing this video. This is the close of the market trading on May 12th. See how close we're getting to these 65-minute offsets here. So that's something that's going to bear watching. Okay, so now just very quickly, let's go to, let's say, a 27-minute futures chart. So now we'll put in at ES.D, so that's the continuation contract for the S&P. And we want .D because 27-minute charts deal with daytime trading only. So it's important that you put a .D in there. When we put the Globex data in there for projections, we will do an at ES without the .D, and that will give us the 24-hour Globex trading charts. So let's take a look. Let's go back on this one a little bit. And you can see the shorter term projections. Okay, now notice again, default projections, how these have changed. These are the default offsets for the 27-minute chart. Starting at the very shortest ones, let's take a look at one of them here, the 10.5 to 12. You know what? I just noticed we're on a 65-minute. We don't want to be there. So not only do you have to change it to the future at ES.D, but we also have to change the time signature. So we want to put in 27 MIN. You're going to make these mistakes when you first start using the software, so it's nice that you get to see me make a mistake like that when I'm pointing stuff out. You want to make sure that you have both the right time signature and the right symbol. So we're using a futures chart now, and for that reason, the stock index futures trade 6 hours and 45 minutes every day, and that's how we break up the 27-minute charts. So this is what you're looking at, and you notice the projections being given here. And you can see most of them are red or green. That means that they were accurate projections. They were met. So you change these offsets the same way here as you did for the other charts. Let's do one over here where we can see it. Okay, so let's do, now 105 to 120 is the equivalent of, on the daily charts, the equivalent of a 7 to 8 day offset, trading day offset, okay? So that's a longer offset, and you tend to get projections that don't come as often because you don't cross them as often. This one was given back here based on this low and these crossings right here. So it was a good projection, but it's a little muddy in here because the projection box is running into offsets and it's not as clear as we would like it to be. If we go back a little on these, you can see some of the other results here that were a lot clearer. This one, for example, here, we came just into the lower part of the projection box, and that's when prices had a pretty good downside reaction. So I hope you're getting the feel for how to work this. It's going to come to you. I promise you, if you've been working with markets more than 6 months, this is going to come to you very quickly, because the way Stefan has set it up is it ends up being intuitive software. It really is. Now, let's show one more thing, and that is the web chart. So a lot of times with these offsets, as you've noticed on my YouTube videos, you get offsets that look like this, and it's not very clear what happens here. Did we get below the offsets? I don't know what happened. So in a case like that, you simply click on one of the offsets and you say, show the web chart. The web chart is a lot clearer, as you'll see in a moment, and you get to see the continuum. This continuum, what I call the continuum, the gray area, is simply the distance between the short offset, the red line, and the long offset. So if you would imagine taking the short offset and moving it over on a very small basis, little by little, till it matched up with the long offset, the tracks that you would leave behind would form this continuum. Okay? So imagine moving this red offset line over to the right here till it gets to the long offset. You can see how that track is formed, the gray track. Now, sometimes it's simple on a straight line. Other times it gets a little choppier. But what you get to see is, with a lot more clarity, here you get into this mushy zone here. Well, is it going to stay there? Is it going to come back down? Our potential upside is going to be invalidated. Finally, it gets above, you get your projection, and you get up to it. Okay? It's a lot clearer here on the web charts, and you can very quickly bring them up for any of these charts. When you see a chart, you say, it looks a little messy to me. Simply click on one of the offset lines and say, show the web chart. Okay? You can also show the web chart on load. I don't usually recommend that because that sometimes is going to take longer. Once in a while, a lot longer to load. So I would say bring your regular chart up first, and then when you want to clarify points like this where it gets a little mushy in terms of the data and the offsets, then you just go to show the web chart. Okay? So there are a lot more things we could go through. I just wanted to give you a feel for how you're going to use this software, how you're going to set it up. So now remember, what I've been doing is going from one time signature to another. I showed you the weeklies, I showed you the dailies, I showed you the 65 minutes. What you will probably want to do, rather than do that and have to switch, click, and see each one, is set up, however you want to do it, your own little workspaces for maybe each one of the time signatures. 65-minute for the cash, daily for the cash, weekly for the cash. Like that. That will come to you and you'll get the feeling for how you want to set it up. And as long as you have that flexibility to switch these offsets as quickly as I showed you, we can switch them, then it's going to be very pleasing for you, trust me. I should point one thing out. When we go here and click on, well, let's go to an offset. It makes it easier. And we change the offset. When you do that, it does not change the input offsets, okay? What do you mean by that? Well, let me show you. The input offset right now is 3.5 to 4. That's the offset that was initially put in when you go to the parameters section, okay? Let's go to the parameter section and show you. Now, remember, we're looking at an offset of 105 to 120. We can see that from our menu. But we know that the input offsets for our menu is 3.5 to 4. And let's go look at that and confirm it. We want to go to Studies, Edit Studies, and if we look at the indicator to customize it, it still says 3.5 to 4. Okay? So you don't change the inputs by right-clicking on the lines and putting them into your chart. Stefan told me that I don't know if it's impossible to do, but it's difficult to do. And there's no need to do it really, as long as you're aware of that difference. This is still within the inputs here, 3.5 to 4 in terms of the offset, okay? But when you bring up different time signatures, you will automatically get the corresponding offsets for those time signatures that you can switch to back and forth, up and down, however you want to go, however you want to look. It will not change the inputs on the original inputs that you do for the parameters, but it will change the offsets, and that's all you're interested in when you're doing the analysis. Okay, this has been a long video, but I want you to have it, those of you that get the program on a trial basis and hopefully decide that it's something you can really use. We wanted you to have this so you could go back and forth at times and look at it and maybe remind you of a few things in terms of how to handle the software. Thanks for watching, and I know you're going to have questions, and we'll be here to answer them. But in the meantime, you'll have this video as a primer for how to use the software.